think to this? Is the Church of England racist? Are maternity services in this country racist too? Every single day there seems to be a list now, doesn't there, of more services, organisations and institutions that might be fundamentally racist. But are we creating a crisis where none exists? Is this really the case, that basically this country is dripping from head to toe with racism? Well, let's start with Calvin. You've been all over the press today, haven't you?
Is it because I'm black? Why are you starting with me?
Yeah, oh, gosh. I'm going to start with you because you are dominating the headlines. You've been quite an A-list celebrity today. I feel honoured to have your company. What's been going on?
This is the problem, isn't it? If everything is racist and everyone is racist, it undermines actual racism that is happening. I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that the Church of England is racist, and that is my belief, that I would need to see evidence before I believe it. However...
Tell us your story, by the way, just in case people have not caught up with this.
So I have spent the last couple of years training for the priesthood, for holy orders in the Church of England. I was sent to Oxford to read theology. I've reached the end of my training now, and now is the time that I should be sent to a parish as an assistant priest or a curate. And I was assigned a curacy, and it was snatched away in the last minute, and I didn't know why. So I put in a subject access request to the church and found out that actually the Bishop of Edmonton and the Bishop of London believe strongly that the church is institutionally racist. And when I go on TV and say that I don't believe it is, that has sparked an issue.
Forgive me, because I must say, I don't know some of the people you name personally. Are they white?
They are very white, they are very middle class, very metropolitan liberal elite, and they are very much of the mindset that we should listen to more ethnic minority voices on this issue. But not my voice as an ethnic minority, because I've got the wrong perspective. I find it troubling when we have a host of, in fact, the Archbishop of Canterbury has said the church is institutionally racist and the country. The Bishop of London has said the church is institutionally racist. Bishop of Edmonton. So the three most powerful people, in my line at least, from London up into the Archbishop, have said that it is the case. I've said it isn't. Now you've got three metropolitan liberal elite people with white guilt saying that this institution is racist, telling an ethnic minority person who says that it isn't, that he's wrong on this matter and his experience doesn't count. I find that cognitive dissonance difficult to navigate, to be honest with you. Unless they're trying to prove themselves right. They've been in power, 11 years, 18 years. If the church is racist, either they're responsible for it or they haven't solved it. Therefore, I believe they should probably step down and hold an election to get someone else in.
Ella, where do you stand on all this?
Well, it's funny because, throughout history, the church in centuries gone by, played a significant role in intervening into politics, whether that be to criticise kings or to try and change the makeup of parliament or, all these things. And we generally understand in the modern age that's a bad thing, that religion should be separate, or at least those of us who believe, are secular, believe that religion should be separate and kept different from having political influence. And, of late, the Church of England seems like it's tried to make a virtue out of becoming, out of politically interfering. We've had Justin Welby and others hectoring people about climate change. We had the kind of big pronouncement on the war in Ukraine, and not just in terms of sort of Christian moral discussion, there's no harm in religious people voicing their view, but specifically aimed at particular politicians trying to wage a political war and definitely, putting the Church of England on one side of the political debate. And it seems that's what they've done with Calvin, which is, there should be some understanding that it's not like you're sort of coming out as some kind of rabid, bigot or something, even though, not to say that would then make it OK to ban you, but, is voicing an opinion that most people probably, to some extent, agree with. We know that the whole kind of desire to declare everything as institutionally racist is at best questioned by most people. But the church is, as I understand it, meant to have a kind of broad sense of bringing in everyone if they believe in God, that being the fundamental thing, and not having a kind of checkpoint list at the door of the church to say, if you don't agree with this political viewpoint, you're not allowed in. So it seems absurd to me, and it's certainly not a way to attract people to a particular religion in the modern age.
The only checkpoint is the Bible, and the Bible says there's neither Greek nor Jew. It says that we are all made of one blood, all nations of men, to use the quote directly. Therefore, we are all one people, as Bob Marley would say, one blood, one nation. So to be separating people into white and non-white is actually counter-scriptural.
Look, I don't know about Calvin's individual case, and I think if Calvin hasn't come across racism in the Church of England, that's great. But it is interesting.
Let me just challenge that before you go further, because I have not said I haven't come across racism.
OK.
And racism is an individual sin that people commit, and people should be held responsible for their own actions.
Right.
If people are nasty and mean and racist, they should be held accountable.
Absolutely.
That doesn't make an entire institution
No.
racist.
But actually, the thing is that in the last 35 years, there have been 25 reports dealing in some level with racism. Some have been completely, some have not. And there are 160 recommendations. And in the last report by Welby, he said, we haven't moved far enough. And I actually think that, I think it's good that the church is taking this seriously. I know that the Jews have looked very heavily about racism within Judaism and commissioned Stephen Bush to actually look at it and said, yes, there is. Is that actually, I think we all have to say, yes, that there are often problems. And if you look at it in the church, what Justin Welby says is there aren't enough people who are influential, who are black and ethnic minority. Now, what he's not saying is the church as a whole is terribly racist. But I think to be complacent about it, going to Ella's point, I just think that when I was a child, basically the church was the Conservative Party at prayer. And as soon as they stopped being that, they were accused of whatever it is now, woke. It used to be politically correct. As soon as the church started, actually, Jesus upset a lot of people, right? That's what I thought. I am not a Christian like Ella, I'm a secularist. But I thought that that's what the church was supposed to do, was supposed to question things. I even question why we're in favour of war when, we're not supposed to kill people, right? But it just seems to me that actually that what the church is trying to do, and you look at the whole thing about the ordination of women, about gay people, actually is that within the church, quite rightly, there is a very serious debate about how they go on, and it's a good thing that they have the debate rather than being complacent.
Indeed, but the problem is, and you say they should take these issues seriously, of course they should, but they shouldn't take a political bias. If they take any bias, it should be based on the Bible. For example, the Sewell report came out recently that didn't find any evidence of institutional racism, and the church frowned upon it and said this report causes anger and upset amongst us. It didn't look at the recommendations, it disregarded it. They did their own report, and within the church's report, Lament to Action, they implement a lot of critical race theory, which we know to be a divisive and toxic and refutable ideology. For example, taking on board positive discrimination. So every single leadership position has to have a shortlist of 30% black and ethnic minorities on it. Now, considering that the country is, 14% black and ethnic minority, and about half of those are Muslim, where do they think they're going to get these people from? It's an arbitrary number, and we know that quotas don't work. They've also said that, the next time there's a general election for the governing body of the Church of England, the General Synod, not after the election, they have to co-opt some black people on, as if to suggest that black people can't put themselves up for election. It's patronising, it's biased by critical race theory ideology, and it's not helping. It's not taking on board the recommendations that have been put forward by the independent report.
But Kelvin, a lot of black people in the church feel that there is racism in the church.
No, I want to stop you right there. Do not try to speak for an entire demographic. You cannot sit there and
I didn't.
A lot of
I
black
said a
people.
lot. I didn't say all, but I've read the reports.
There is racism amongst people in every sector of life.
Right.
That does not make an institution racist. If there are hurdles to prevent someone from progressing within an institution, then perhaps. The second most powerful and influential person in the Church of England, until recently, Jonathan Sentamu, was a black African fellow. I personally have not felt hurdles until I've reached this point, and the argument over hurdles. So I don't agree that saying a lot of people have experienced racism is enough to suggest that an institution is racist.
Yeah, and I have to say, Ella, it seems like this kind of institutional kind of level of accusation is becoming more and more frequent. So, we'll all be familiar by now today. Another report has come out saying about maternity services, asking or suggesting, should I say, that these structurally, institutionally, again, are racist. What do you think to this?
Well, Calvin's point about the difference between racial discrimination and racism on an individual basis, even if that individual basis is repeated quite a number of times. And the distinction between that and institutional racism, which is an institution built with racism baked into it, or institutional sexism and that kind of thing, that's a very important distinction. Because if you look at the news, there's the report from Birthrights that came out today that surveyed 300 women and found things that I think most of us who've been tuned into the maternity discussion don't find surprising. That, for example, there is black women are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth or during pregnancy than white women. Some of that has some very material reasons for it. For example, there is evidence that some people working in maternity services have been judging that whether or not somebody has jaundice, a baby has jaundice or sepsis by the colour of whether their skin is yellow. That's obviously far more difficult to tell if you are black with dark skin than you are white. So there are problems, but no one is, rather than sort of going through the rigmarole of saying, we're institutionally racist, we're so sorry, or people demanding that the police is institutionally racist, we're so sorry. What about asking the broader question of, is maternity services in this country fit for purpose? And we know that the Donna Ockenden report that came out a number of months ago, which found the scandal in Shrewsbury and Telford services had, resulted in 201 babies dying and 9 women and, 1,500 families being affected or harmed in some way by failing maternity services, primarily because women weren't being listened to. But there's a broad question about a universal question, which is to say, when black women say, I'm not being listened to when I'm asked for pain relief, and white women in Shrewsbury and Telford are saying, I wasn't listened to when my baby stopped moving at 35 weeks, there's a common experience there. And the answer is to say, how can we, to use that terrible term, level up or improve maternity services for all, without ignoring differences of different people's experiences. But there just seems to be no benefit in asserting, kind of labelling something as institutionally racist just for the sake of it, because often, as we note with the recent report that came out from the police about racism, what ends up happening is that you have an institution saying, we're so sorry that we're racist, we're really sorry, but actually we're going to not change very much. And in the police's instance, we're going to carry on doing stop and search, in fact, increase stop and search powers. The same happens with the NHS. They might say, we're really sorry that we don't treat, that we, assume that Asian women are less able to, deal with pain, and black women are more likely to deal with pain, and so we treat them differently. Sorry about that, but we're not going to change very much. And I think the need is for material change across the board and a universal outlook for improvement, rather than the kind of the divisive discussion around institutional racism or sexism or whatever it is.
I just think that if you're 4 times more likely to die in childbirth if you're black or ethnic minority, that actually you have to do something about it, right? Yes, you don't just say we're institutionally racism. You say, what are we going to do to stop this? Because it is a terrible statistic. I mean, it's shaming, right? That's what, and it's about getting those things. And as you say, with stop and search, we know who are getting stopped and searched. It's black boys, right? I mean, I remember when my son was a young man, he didn't get stopped and searched as often as a black boy.
But the point I'm trying to make is that if you dig down into the reasons why, for example, with this Birthrights report, many of the women, there's a couple of cases of very practical things I talked about, like jaundice, or people misdiagnosing on the basis of treating someone who's black different to someone who's white physically. But most often the things that women talked about were not being listened to, either when they were asking for pain relief or when they were reporting symptoms late in pregnancy. And that is an experience that, if you compare that with Telford and Shrewsbury, was universal. And, Telford and Shrewsbury, by way of sort of location and demographic makeup, happened to be majority white women.
You're absolutely right. But it's still true that if you're black, you're 4 times more likely to die. And all I'm saying is we have to do something about that. Yes, we have to do something about maternity services, but actually we do have to say there is a special problem that needs to be sorted out, and we need to find out what has gone wrong that you're more likely to die in childbirth if you're black.
The problem isn't that you're black. The problem is, so the moment we put it down to skin colour, we miss the underlying problem. We have to delve deeper and find out what's going on. If we put it down to racism, then we're missing the bigger picture. A racial disparity is not necessarily evidence of racism. So I think Ella's on the money with this one, because it's black, Asian, and actually white people from deprived areas that are going through this issue. And this is why the Equalities Minister has put recommendations to fix the problem, or to work towards helping the problem of mortality rates with continuity care for black, Asian, and people from deprived areas. So it's not just looking at skin colour, it's looking at who these problems affect and addressing them holistically, and not pigeonholing them off onto one demographic.
Yeah, I found it quite. I found this comment quite interesting. Melissa Brown, a midwife and officer at Birthright, said that maternity services were facing immense challenges. She says, "We did hear positive examples of maternity care, but there is racism and racial discrimination at a structural and individual level, which is putting black, brown and mixed ethnicity women at harm. There are many complex reasons for poorer health outcomes for ethnic minorities, and racism and discrimination is definitely playing a role." Now, I've got to say, I've listened to this being debated quite a bit today, and I've been quite astonished at the kind of sentiment that I've heard kind of coming through, because people will phone in to radio shows, wherever, and say, yeah, you know, I was desperate for pain relief and all I was offered was kind of paracetamol, and then the presenter, oh my gosh, yeah, this is, you know, racism, and it makes me slightly uncomfortable, because I assume if you train to be a midwife and you're going to be a special kind of person to go into the caring profession, it's because you want to help people deliver babies. And I find it slightly peculiar that there's just this natural assumption by many people that somebody, a midwife, would say, oh, yes, today I'm going to help. Oh, I'm not going to help you, though, because you're black.
It's the bad faith
assumption. I just find it a little bit...
So to give you a comparison, white people die of cancer more regularly than black patients. Now, would that suggest that white patients aren't being treated as well as black patients? I would suggest otherwise. I don't think that would be the case. I don't think cancer doctors are racist towards white patients in favour of black patients. But there's a clear disparity there, which means we need to look into the picture and find out what's going on at a deeper level, and not just assume that it's race-based.
So on this thing about, I mean, what the black women say is that their pain doesn't get taken as... I mean, the original report, I'm not talking about the report that came out today, the original report where it said 4 times as many black women die in childbirth, it's because that they were seen as tougher, right? Is that there was an attitude that black women were tougher. I mean, that's what was said.
Who? Because if I sit there, for example, I had a C-section, and I was offered, after the C-section, paracetamol and ibuprofen. And I remember looking at the person and saying, are you having a laugh? I take that when I've got a hangover. You do not pretty much cut me in half and then give me paracetamol and ibuprofen. I don't think so. I want morphine. Now, if that hospital's pain management strategy is that at step 1, level 1, we offer patients paracetamol and ibuprofen, if that is their policy, then that is their policy. And if you want to accept that as a patient, accept it. And if you don't, push back like what I push back. So when I hear people saying, well, I don't think my pain was taken seriously, and that's because you're racist, I find that a little bit hard to believe.
You just look at the... What I'm saying is that we have to... I'm quite happy with what Calvin says about digging down, but I do think that if you are more likely to die in childbirth, and I'm sure that class has got a lot to do with it, and deprivation, I absolutely agree with you, but I think that it's perfectly reasonable to dig down and find out what's going on. And as Ella said, sometimes it's about, this isn't childbirth, but it's about jaundice and the colour of the skin, and there can be all sorts of things. Is that, I mean, you know, it's just like finding out that when they do tests on dummies, in cars, right, that they always use men, that they don't actually use women, and everything is done about men. Well, the point is that if you dig down, you find out why women are killed more often in car crashes, and it's because seatbelts don't fit properly. And I just think that it's perfectly possible, without getting all upset about it, to dig down and say, there is a problem, let's solve this problem, without having to go into, oh God, we're not going near this because it smells of institutional racism, when there is clearly a problem.
Well, do you think there's clearly a problem? Get in touch with me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Let me know your thoughts on that topic.